Is 2025 the year that buyers finally get a little bit of relief and see more inventory hit the market? It's been frustrating, I know. In my 15-year career selling residential real estate, the last 2 years have been the most difficult years if you are a buyer trying to purchase a home. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of inventory we've seen in the market. Well, today we are going to break down our housing forecast for 2025. We're going to answer that inventory question, what we think is going to happen, as well as what we think sales are going to do, what prices are going to do, as well as interest rates, so you can be well informed as you head in to 2025. But before we can go into our predictions and our forecasts, we also got to take a look at what happened in 2024 in the real estate market. And the first thing we're going to talk about is home values. Values went up roughly 5.5%. Median home values are finishing up the year right around $295,000 in greater Cincinnati. And when I'm talking about our statistics and our numbers today for Cincinnati, I'm hitting on 4 of our main counties, and that's Hamilton County, Butler County, Warren County, and Claremont County. So we saw about a 5.5% increase in home values from last year to this year. A little bit more modest compared to years past, where we saw that hockey stick growth of a ton of appreciation year after year. It eased slightly last year. And as we go into next year, I actually think we're going to see more of the same. We're going to probably see somewhere between 3.5% to 5% in median home value gains in 2025. And we're going to get into the reasoning behind that. Keep in mind, real estate is very hyper local. I think you could see maybe a little less appreciation as you get outside the 275 loop, but you'll see a little bit more inside the 275 loop, or those areas that are just really, really desirable that will continue to have that low inventory we mentioned before. So let's talk about mortgage interest rates. And I have been a proponent the last 2 years. I've said they're going down, they're going down, they're going down. Fortunately, rates have stayed relatively high. We were way off in our prediction last year. Many people thought that we could see interest rates go down as low as the high 5s, and we obviously saw that that did not happen. This year, they have bounced back and forth. We've seen them go anywhere from the lower 6s all the way up to 7.8, I believe, is where the high was. And that's for a 30-year fixed rate interest rate mortgage. At the time we're filming this, they're hovering right around 7%. But most people are projecting we can see them come down slightly, but it's going to be a little bit more of the same. So what we feel, we're going to see interest rates probably in that low to mid 6% range. But I think you're going to see them bounce around as we go in this year, hovering, but mostly in the 6s. I think we'll come down, stay away from the 7s. And that really has had an impact in the market. A lot of buyers are getting adjusted to, hey, this is somewhat of the new normal. There are a lot of folks that were hoping that these rates were going to come down. And I think eventually they will. It's just inflation has to get under control. And there are a lot of different things happening as we get into the new year that could have an impact on rates. Will these new tariffs that go into place cause more inflation? There's some people that say it will, some people that say it won't. But at the end of the day, a lot of it has to do with inflation. So we think that you can anticipate rates being kind of in the mid 6s when you average out throughout the year. But once again, being somewhat volatile, but less than what the average was in 2024, which makes things a little bit more affordable for buyers. So of all the prognosticators that have been surveyed of what they think interest rates will do next year, when you take the average of about 9 of these folks, we're talking anyone from Fannie Mae, Wells Fargo, CoreLogic, a lot of the data places we'll go and take a look at in their forecasts. Most of them are coming up with an average right around 6.3% is what you'll see rates. Some are projecting as low as 6.12%, some up to 6.8%. So you kind of get an idea of what that range is. And that's where we think they're gonna fall at the end of the day. Okay, so now to that inventory question that we talked about at the very beginning of this video. And this is where the good news is gonna come out, is most people are expecting that more inventory will hit the market. Actually, Michael Simonson, someone who I follow very, very closely, is projecting that 15% more inventory will come onto the market in 2025. I tend to agree with him. I can already see, based on how busy we are, we're filming this in early January in the cold, meeting with a number of people who are thinking about selling. And what's happened is a number of these people, they settled for their homes during the pandemic. Interest rates were very low at that point in time, and they may have settled for that home, but they didn't want to get rid of that low interest rate, right? We've all talked about that lock-in effect of homeowners who they do not want to get rid of that sub 3% or 3% interest rate to trade into something in a 6 or 7% interest rate environment, which we've been in. But a number of these people have a ton of equity that they've built into their home. We actually saw home prices from 2019 to 2024 increase about 55%. So the good news for buyers this year is that we do see more inventory hitting the market. Now, does that mean that we're totally switching over to a buyer's market from a seller's market like it's been? No, there will still be relatively low levels of inventory. We just see it improving from what we've seen in the years past, so that it won't be quite as competitive as a market as we've seen the last few years. As we mentioned, the last 2 years have probably been the toughest markets for a home buyer in the last, since I've been in the business, in 15 years. So with more inventory coming to the market, that should hopefully provide more options for folks, as well as not seeing as many of these bidding wars. As we mentioned, real estate is hyper local. Certain markets are going to have less inventory than others, so we don't expect bidding wars to go away by any chance. We will still see them in 2025, especially I feel like in the earlier part of the year when less inventory is on the market. But as we get into those late summer months or so, that's when I think you'll start to see that inventory compound just a little bit, and we'll probably get a little bit more to a stabilized market. Not completely, it's still gonna be a seller's market, but it will be a little bit more stable than what we've seen in the past. So with more inventory hitting the market, we also expect more sales. So just to kind of put things in perspective, the number of home sales has dropped dramatically from the pandemic. We had in 2019 in greater Cincinnati, in those 4 counties I mentioned earlier, we had roughly 22,000 home sales. These are single family and condo sales. 2023, that number dropped all the way down to about 16,000 homes. And last year we saw a little bit more inventory hit the market, so we had more home sales. That number last year was like 17,000. This mirrors the national trend where in 2019 we saw around 6 million homes sell annually. And then we saw last year and the year before, we didn't even hit 5 million homes for sale. We haven't gone back to pre-pandemic levels at this point, but once again, our market is very much mirroring what's happening around the country. And we're gonna see the number of sales tick up this year as we've followed the trend lines from pre-pandemic levels to what we've seen the last 2 years. Keep in mind, I'm talking about greater Cincinnati, and not all things follow the trends of what's happening nationally. And one of the things I just wanna kind of warn you about a little bit is, as you're watching the news or the media, they're going to report on national trends in other markets, and some markets experience other things that we aren't seeing here locally. For example, inventory has been very low the last 2 years, but if you lived in Austin or maybe Nashville or some places in Florida, they've seen the inventory already start to rise in those areas. But for most parts around the country, we've been inventory constrained and we've been following that trend. but there are other markets that the inventory has been coming out, and we are just not one of them. And it's been somewhat limited, and I think it's going to continue to be limited, because that gets to my fifth point. And that is that there aren't a lot of new construction developments out on the market right now in greater Cincinnati. There are more options that are coming out there, but in particular, there aren't many developments hitting the market for that high-end luxury buyer. And that's why we feel the trend of teardown and new builds will continue into 2025. We've been fortunate enough to serve over 3,000 buyers and sellers in the greater Cincinnati area. So we know this market well, everything into northern Kentucky, to the west side, to the east side of Cincinnati. So certainly if you're looking to make a move in 2025, we'd love to sit down and have a buyer strategy session with you. Or if you're thinking about selling, we'd love to go on that listing appointment with you to let you know kind of what your home is worth, what things you can do to help improve your market, and how to prepare into 2025. One of the hot tips I tell people all the time is the spring market starts after the Super Bowl in February. And the reason why is because that is when there is less inventory on the market. You have less competition. That's when we see a lot of those bidding wars, where a lot of people, if you wait till June or July, you've kind of already missed that window, and that's when that inventory starts to climb, especially this year like we think. So I would recommend, if you're a seller, to start early and making your plan, as well as if you're a buyer, it's never too early to start to plan in 2025 to make sure you have a good plan in place. If you've enjoyed this video, we have more information, more insightful videos, property tours, everything. So make sure you subscribe and like our channel. We'd love to see you here and come back. So in 2025, we expect a lot of it to be somewhat similar to what we saw in 2024, with the exception of a little bit of rise in inventory, which should help give buyers some relief and have more buyers in the market to see more homes sell in the greater Cincinnati area. As always, if we can help you out, always reach out to us at info@oylerhines.com, and we'll be sure to see you on the next video.